for the Writer's Block, our weekly look at all things sports, and we thought we might talk about something other than football this week, but nah, we're going to stick to football. I'm Jenni Carlson here in the studios of the Oklahoman, joined by Cedric Golden in the studios of the Austin American-Statesman. Howdy, friend.
What's up, Jen?
Hey, it's football time, and there's a lot to talk about. Let's start with the college football playoff. We talked a little bit about them last week, the selection committee. The rankings are now a weekly thing as we get later and later in the season. Cedric, we saw that big Oklahoma-Baylor game on Saturday night. Huge comeback by the Sooners. Great game down in Waco. Now we see Oklahoma only rising a little with that win, and Baylor falling a little, but still behind other one-loss teams. Cedric, I don't think things set up very well for the Big 12 when it relates to the college football playoff.
Here are my takes from the weekend. I get back from Ames, Iowa, roll into Des Moines, and grab a burger at the restaurant at the Marriott, and there's the Sooners, Baylor starting in the fourth quarter. I'm like, I am right on time. And, we'd be keeping up with it on the drive back. But here's what happened, Jed. Great win for Lincoln Riley. Great win for the Oklahoma Sooners. The Big 12 is dead when it comes to the CFP. The Big 12 needed Baylor to run the table to have any chance to get into that college football playoff. I hate to say it, but I think the Sooners are going to come up short. I think the Sooners are going to win out. I think they're going to win Bedlam. Who do they have after that, Jen?
Well, they play TCU this week and then Bedlam next week. So a couple games that have some difficulty in front of them before they get to the Big 12 game. But I would think a lot of people are expecting them to be favored in both those games, Cedric.
Yeah, a one-loss OU team I don't know gets in. A K-State loss isn't very good. I think they should be ahead of South Carolina, which lost to App State, and Georgia, which lost to South Carolina. So I think the SEC always gets a little bit of extra love from the committee, and that's just a personal opinion. But if you're asking me what's going to happen, I think Ohio State is the best team in the country. Chase Young's coming back from his suspension, which was unfair to begin with. I think LSU is the second best team in the country. I think they're going to run the table. And I think that Clemson is not the Clemson that we're used to, but the ACC is so bad, Jen, and no one's going to beat Clemson in the ACC. So that's three teams right there. That fourth spot is up for grabs. Alabama should be out of there. Tua is hurt, and they shouldn't be fifth or sixth wherever they have them. Alabama's probably 11th or 12th without Tua. So I think that OU has an outside shot of getting in. But if you're asking me if they make it in, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I think the three teams that you mentioned, whether their resume is good enough to be in those top three spots or not, Clemson, I'm looking at you, they're still probably the three teams that will, at this point, if things keep going the way they're going, they're in. Then you look at, let's talk about a couple teams that stand in any Big 12 team's way. From the Pac-12. You've got Oregon at 6th and Utah at 7th. And, there's been a lot of talk about, non-conference and how bad it is at Baylor. Yes, Baylor had a not good non-conference schedule. But if you look at wins in the conference, Baylor already has beaten a couple top 25 teams. They've beaten Oklahoma State. They've beaten K-State. They have 2 top 25 wins, and yet they continue to be ranked a lot lower than Oregon and Utah, and neither of them have 2 top 25 wins. So, even with that loss to Oklahoma, you would think Baylor's overall body of work would be better or would rank a little higher compared to those 2 Pac-12 teams, but we see them 7 spots below Utah, 7-14 now, where Baylor falls. So I think that you're right, Cedric. I do think even if Oklahoma runs the table, the bar is going to be really, really high. They're going to have to hope for a lot of chaos. And frankly, we knew that when they lost to K-State. K-State has shown in some ways to be better than we thought, but yet they haven't run the table since beating Oklahoma. So again, you wonder if that becomes, more of a barrier. Any loss is, obviously, but that is not the quality loss that it might have been, had K-State continued to win. So it just seems, Cedric, like there just aren't enough spots available to include even Oklahoma with the brand that they have, with the college football playoffs appearances that they made before. I just don't think they're going to have enough to push up into one of those spots. And frankly, a lot of this comes back to the Big 12 is going to have to beat non-conference opponents that are good. I mean, you're going to have not just K-State beating Mississippi State. You're going to have Texas beating LSU and some of these other teams that need to beat these non-conference teams for the Big 12 to really reestablish itself.
Exactly, and Texas beats LSU and OU beats Texas, then OU's higher than OU is right now. If OU doesn't lose to K-State, Jen, they're fourth.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe they're fourth because they're Oklahoma. There's a little bit of subjectivity that goes on into these meetings, probably a lot. We're talking about human beings, and there's that perception that the Big 12 isn't great. Let me ask you something, Jen. Why is it when LSU beats Alabama 46-41 that it's an instant classic, but if OU beats Baylor 34-31, then it's not an instant classic? They don't play defense in the Big 12. I don't get that disconnect. I think that's some haterade going on for the Big 12.
Yeah.
The Big 12 is good offensive football. It's good football. Offenses dominate in this conference, but when another conference has a Big 12 sort of game, they give those defenses the benefit of the doubt. I don't like that.
And it's those games, like you said, like about LSU and Alabama, everybody watches that, says, well, that was a great football game. Look at all the offense. Well, yeah, that's what we see all the time in the Big 12.
Every week, and we love it. Come see us. We're the Big 12.
Well,
love it or leave it.
And if it's so bad, why have we seen more teams, LSU, Alabama, even Nick Saban at Alabama has said, you know what? Scoring a lot of points looks like a pretty good idea. So they've adopted those offensive, maybe they're not going full-fledged Mike Leach air raid out there, but they've definitely trended that way. And you know what? If you put it with a really good defense, that's pretty hard to beat. I understand the SEC is playing a higher level of defense than most of the Big 12 teams, but they're adopting the Big 12 offenses now, Ced.
Yes, they are, and what you get is a better, more entertaining brand of football. Mm-hmm. No one's going to draft a defense in the first round of a fantasy league draft, so we know what drives the buzz. We know what moves the needle. We know that the Oklahoma Sooners are one of the most fun offenses year in and year out. Sam Ehlinger is one of the better quarterbacks, and Chucky Brewer from Baylor is really having a good year. So I think that the world is trending toward the Big 12. We just need the CFP to come aboard. Now, I will say this, Jen. I think that the Oklahoma Sooners blew it by losing to K-State. That killed the Big 12's hopes because I knew that Oklahoma was going to go into Baylor and win. Mm-hmm. I had no doubt about that. But the fact that Baylor is no longer unbeaten and the Big 12 is awash in a couple of one-loss teams, that sounds the death knell for the Big 12. Yeah. You ask me if the Big 12 is getting in, I'm going to have to say no. I think OU wins the conference, goes to the Sugar Bowl. Baylor goes to the Alamo Bowl, and Lord knows where the Texas Longhorns are going to go. I might be out there with a mouse in Orlando. I have no idea, Jen.
Yeah, lots of questions up in the air, and what conferences get a lion's share of the playoff and New Year's Six bowls, and how does that affect the trickle down? Are we going to see some conferences unable to fill bowl spots? All that'll be determined. We're only got 2 weeks left in the regular season, and obviously championship Saturday with all the championship games that weekend. A lot more to be determined. But I'm with you, Cedric. I think it's going to be really, really tough sledding for the Big 12 to get a playoff team this year.